Yes, I have the... Wait a minute. I see. She's taken a barnacle, and she's covered it in bioluminescent algae. Has a diversion.
So this is it, huh? After 8 long years, the time of the spotlight for the Nintendo Switch is coming to an end. Well, I think all of us can agree that it had one heck of a run. Ever since the sales of the 3DS dwindled a bit because of lackluster launch and the rise of smartphones in the 2010s, and the sales for the Wii U were as small as they were thanks to poor marketing and overall inconsistent release dates of worthwhile titles, the Switch felt like a perfect way to adapt to the changing landscape. Despite the warts it does have, it's hard to deny that it's been a big place for some of Nintendo's most popular franchises, and it won back the attention of many third-party companies. Some even sought to make a few timed exclusives, or even just exclusives in general for the thing. The amount of games the system has gotten, new and old, ported, remastered, and original, is quite frankly nuts. That's one of many reasons why the Nintendo Switch is currently my favorite console, period. It not only has all kinds of games that I love and want to keep up with, but because it was released during my early college years, I had enough money to purchase one for myself and constantly get new releases at a healthy rate. It has been my go-to gaming system ever since its launch year, even to a point where I got some multi-console releases on it here and there.
I mean, this selection is much bigger compared to my other consoles.
I've loved sharing the phone with my relatives, my former fellow college club, and my internet friends throughout the years, and talking about them in videos for most of my channel's history. Heck, for as overpriced as the Switch Online Expansion Pass is, I will always thank it for giving me a chance to finally play some old games I had yet to pick up. Some I didn't expect to love as much as I did, and now I plan to give this wonderful console the farewell it deserves. For the main rule, the games I believe speak for the system in this sort of context and I will allow on here are exclusives, timed exclusives like Octopath 1 and No More Heroes 3, and remakes. I'm not going to allow any games that were multi-console from the very beginning, straight ports, or remasters that largely use the skeleton of their original releases. So no Skyward Sword HD, Metroid Prime Remastered, or Xenoblade Definitive Edition. And even if this will only apply to the honorable mentions, franchise spin-offs like any of the Mario Parties and the Zelda and Fire Emblem Warriors games are fair game. Now that we're done with that, I'm going to use the age-old only games I've played rule and run through some of the most memorable titles I haven't played or even bought. If any of your favorites are on there, sorry to disappoint you. Anywho, let's switch into high gear and get this show on the road. You know, for a decent bit of the Switch's life cycle, what was done with Kirby seemed like business as usual. I enjoy Star Allies, but most of my enjoyment comes from the Dream Friends that were released as free DLC over time. That, and it has full deity.
Nanomachine, son!
It is a fun game, but it's also a good example of a Kirby game by the book. But the pure validation for enjoying Kirby arrived in 2022, where all of a sudden, the series got its first full-fledged 3D platformer. I still remember how shocked I was at how at long last decided to do this, but it was all worth it in the end. I'm happy with the small number of changes made for the 3D transition, with fewer fighting game input-esque combinations for attacks, and the smaller number of copy abilities, because both were easily compensated for, with moves being ground and air-based, and copy abilities being upgradable. But the game doesn't feel like it's just checking off the boxes that make a Kirby game. It's checking off those boxes and going absolutely nuts while it's at it. The levels take full advantage of the setting being a barren realm visually, and give plenty of fun challenges and memorizing set pieces and scenarios while they're at it. Like, Natural Plains is a different direction from the traditional Grassy Plains level, with it being a city overtaken by nature. It even has a mall that looks pretty chill, and a part where the game decides to turn into Crash Bandicoot. Wendoria Ruins goes all out in variety, being set in an amusement park, and Original Wastelands takes you to different town spots located within a vast desert. Even if themes get reused here and there, nothing feels half-hearted. Every facet feels like it nails that compromise between a fictionalized level to play around with, and an actual place that people can visit. In terms of how they're laid out, while each level is very linear, there is a good amount of exploration. There are some secrets that are well hidden, but are just obvious enough to figure out, and some sections that are built with a puzzle requiring a certain copy ability in mind. I always enjoy looking around these levels because of how fun it is to find some secrets, and some objectives to collect each while they go beyond standard platforming knowledge. There's quite a few that fit the overall theme, and require you to get to know the level inside out as a place, which I found very refreshing. And if you want more out of copy abilities, or the game's mouthful mode, there's plenty of mini challenges spread across each world that can show you everything you can do with them. These are super fun bursts of challenge, you can adapt what you learn with them into the levels easily, and doing them will reward you with trinkets for powering up your copy abilities. It's fun to see these evolve, get stronger, and see you can use them to overcome challenges, sometimes even trivialize. It's also nice to come back to Worldy Town to prepare for future levels, while seeing it grow bigger and more lively the more worldies you rescue, which I feel incentivized for getting all of them for that alone. Said Hub World also has minigames for a quick breather, including good old fishing. The boss battles are awesome, being far more flashy and stylized than most of what we've seen, and this game has a delightful extra mode with the versions of the bosses that, in my opinion, are even better. As someone who became a Kirby fan much later than I would have liked, I'm so happy to have played this and see how it just give Kirby all the best treatment they could in the Switch's later years. It adapts the series traditions into 3D really well, excels in imagination, and is just a fantastic 3D platformer all around. Even if I will happily accept a new 2D adventure for the Switch 2 if that is in the cards, especially since Planet Robot is still my favorite Kirby game, I would also like a new 3D game that goes even further with what Forgotten Land did at some point. And I think that speaks for how highly I think of this game and how much I recommend it. But if you want me to recommend it more, it's getting an update on the Switch 2 with brand new content. How you spoil us. I wonder who remembers how long it took for Bayonetta 3 to release, much less how big the gap between the initial teaser and the trailer we got from the September 2021 Direct was. I remember that a Twitter account kept track of how long we went without any news, and maintained the hype following that moment. But anyways, Bayonetta 3? Pretty spectacular. I was eagerly anticipating this one given 2 is one of my favorite hack and slashes, and 3 definitely delivered. The game at its core doesn't do a bunch of refining what made 2's combat as smooth as it was, but I don't view that as a bad thing, because more of that, plus whatever the game wants to do, is all that was needed. I love messing around with all the new weapons brought to the table, and choosing what I want to invest into, with the yo-yos and the fans being my personal favorites. But full-on summoning demons was a really cool addition too. It's not ideal to do this all the time given it leaves Bayonetta wide open for punishment, but whenever you can get one to fight with you, it both looks and feels incredible. I mean, come on, one of them is a train equipped with all the artillery you can imagine. That immediately won me over. That's before taking Viola into account. She doesn't get any weapons beyond her katana, sure, but I feel that leads to her generally feeling more focused in terms of playstyle, leading to her being fun to master. And come on, throwing hits with these abominations while a demon cat helps you out makes things even better, and activating Witch Time while parrying is still friggin' cool. All these get better with boss fights. They start out as insane and just up the challenge, the spectacle, and in a few cases, the storytelling as the game goes on. My personal favorites are every encounter with Strider. As the stakes get upped, he gains more attacks out of every encounter, and the way they are presented is a sight to behold. He made for a great rival encounter for the game. Even exploring the maps feels great. The forms you get make moving around feel liberating, like you can pull out some stylish movement if you know where to position yourself. There's also plenty of puzzles, optional encounters with Paradiso Angels and Infernal Demons, and even collectibles that unlock extra bite-sized levels, or encounters waiting for you if you know where to look. I feel like this is the biggest thing 3 has over the first 2, as I felt rewarded for searching what was around me here the most. The game not only spaces out the pure insanity and the downtime to let you take in the sights and what just happened very well, but it's also constantly finding unexpected ways to add to the spectacle when the insanity does come back, and it all gives you reason to return for more. I have yet to even mention the alternate costumes, Street Ghost being my favorite, or the final boss of the game feeling like a giant love letter to fans of all 3 games, but I think I could say that this is, to me, a good shakeup for the Switch's catalog when you put it next to more friendly titles, and one of the best hack and slashes in recent years that I wholeheartedly recommend. Heck, go further and get 1 and 2 for the Switch as well. All 3 are amazing hack and slashes that are worth picking up. For all the really questionable or even dumb things Square Enix has done over the years, one of the coolest things is branch out with some of their games to bring back some of the style and charm that their RPGs back in the early to mid 90s were known for. This can definitely be seen as far back as Bravely Default on the 3DS, which did get a direct sequel also on the 3DS, a successor sequel on the Switch, and now a Switch 2 remaster that is on the way. But among the return to classic RPGs is the point where Octopath Traveler came along. I was very interested in this game when I first saw it, as I was looking for more RPGs for my Switch collection, but I found myself growing more attached to the characters, their struggles, and this world that quickly found its way among my favorite games of that year. The fact that the game gives you a choice for you want to start with already gives it an edge, as the way you progress works in a way where any of the 8 travelers could be the main protagonist, but it all works because I like these 8 characters and their respective stories. Each one narratively has plenty of great moments for all that they come across, and I like how they use the structure to incorporate different tones to give them their own reason to go on an adventure. Primrose, for example, was largely used for nothing more than entertainment her whole life, and when she has a moment to break free and pursue the men responsible for murdering her father, it cost the life of someone who she saw as a friend and gave her that bit of happiness. Compare this to someone like Alphen, who was inspired to travel the world to help people because of one time he saved a life from being taken by an injury from a snake bite, or Tressa, who wants to promote good commerce through the continent. Despite the paths not really crossing all that much narratively, aside from some side banter and one big quest at the end, everyone is given enough room to show who they are and do what they believe is right in the world. I look forward to every chapter to see where everyone goes and what they will discover next, which is really shown after completing all the Chapter 1s, where the game really opens up. Exploring Worstera is fun for the many locations you'll eventually visit, and the secrets hanging around every corner. There's lots of small hidden dungeons you can go to that help with side quest completion. I think you should tackle at least some of the side quests and these dungeons, because they can house some good encounters to keep your team's levels in check. Plus, the side quests can reward you with either a helpful item, or more importantly, money, which is very helpful in keeping your party up to date. Not to mention, these can generally be really fun to help the NPCs out with their problems. Some even tell stories that span across much of the adventure, and with certain character actions, some even have multiple endings. Or you could just challenge anyone to a fight and cause chaos with no repercussions if you get away with it. Why yes sir, I do like to break into other people's houses because there can be good items in them sometimes. It's an RPG! But the biggest reward for exploring is the job shrines. Every character already has one job permanently equipped to them as their primary one, like Ulrich is your warrior, Ophelia is your cleric, Cyrus is your mage, or scholar rather, you get the picture. But if you find the job shrines, you can equip one of those 8 jobs or one of the 4 advanced ones near the end of the game as your secondary job. With that, you can mix and match certain combinations to make every party member your own. Like you want to make Primrose a full-on mage, or trust up both a merchant and a thief at the same time? Go nuts! It gets even better when you learn more battle skills for certain jobs, because while those can only be used for the ones the character has equipped, it gives them passive skills that are theirs for good. That gives you loads of free range for customization, and lots to think about when optimizing your build. With the right ones, the party members can become ridiculously strong, and I find that experimentation rewarding. But even before taking into account what you can do with these skills, the game has an amazing battle system. Basing battles around turns, the depth of them revolves around using enemy weaknesses to stagger them, and managing resources to unleash your best attacks at the right time. You can only break an opponent's guard by hitting them with any weaknesses they have, so it's important to pick up on what enemies in the area are generally weak to, optimize your party to prepare for them since your chosen lead cannot be removed, manage your SP and BP which can power up certain moves or let characters attack multiple times to get the upper hand on them, and save your strongest attacks for when the target is stunned since they are always susceptible to critical hits. Swinging wildly won't get you very far, but it is worth trying certain moves to see what the set of weaknesses are, but it always feels good to poke holes in their defenses and then just sweep, especially bosses since they have devastating attacks that are telegraphed, but can be stopped by stunning them. There's less to consider, and I like how battles aren't as easy to beat as just leveling up as high as possible. Octopath Traveler as a whole doesn't just feel like it's bringing back classic RPG tropes that have withstood the test of time. It wants to see how stylized they can make them, and how much it could shake up with what one might already know from Square's older JRPGs, and deliver an experience all its own. Nor does it use sprites for budget reasons, but rather an art direction that has a classic feel, but also that fresh modern-day edge. All this with a soundtrack that is pure bliss, make for a fantastic experience. Heck, they went even further with all this in the game's sequel. While I generally think Octopath Traveler 2 improved a ton from the first, especially making every traveler's journey feel more connected, and is overall a more enjoyable experience in my opinion, I sadly can't count it because it was released on multiple systems from day one, unlike the first game, which was initially a Switch exclusive, published by Nintendo. But I believe how highly I think of both games speaks for how much I would recommend them. There's a whole adventure waiting for you if you decide to hop on. After Fire Emblem was saved by Awakening and became a B-tier sales series for Nintendo with Fates, I'm glad the series basically did everything it could to capitalize on it for the entirety of the Switch's lifecycle. Before even considering how much Fire Emblem Heroes did for new and old characters alike, not only did it experiment with Musou gameplay 2 times over, but it got 2 more mainline entries, the first of which being number 7 on this list, Fire Emblem Three Houses. A game that really looked into what could be done with prior entries and do them in different ways, and the one entry I can say had the release period where the Fire Emblem fandom felt the most alive. I will never forget how many people, fans and non-fans alike, were talking about this game when it first released. I remember all these clips showing moments people found funny, especially memes of like Cynthia deleting the Death Knight, how many people grew attached to the characters, many for different reasons, and even the voice cast chiming in with their own posts related to it. Shoutouts to Mark Whitten getting the Seth Quest meme to take off as much as it did. It was like nothing else I had seen for this series at the time, but that's just more of a supplement to how fantastic Three Houses is. While the map design does feel a little more lax than what came before, seemingly trying to go for having these locations feel more like actual battlegrounds for war, I think they get upheld by how much freedom of customization you have over your party. Nearly everyone starts off with the most basic of classes, Commoner and Noble, and only has their base stats and a selected weapon, nudging you to one class family. Nothing is stopping you from exploring every option available using weapon ranks, which can go up through battle or through teaching lessons, more of that in a bit. And with most classes having so few restrictions on what they can or cannot use, like I think Magic has the most restrictions, which is fine, there are so many different ways to build your units that I would bloat this segment listing a bunch of the weird ones. And if that wasn't enough to make combat fun, Combat Arts returned from Shadows of Valencia to help wipe the floor with stronger foes, and even though pair-ups are not here, adjutants and battalions more than pick up the slack, with the latter making fights against the new monster enemies more thrilling and strategic, not to mention helpful on resource grinding. But what made this even more fun for me was that I genuinely cared about almost every character in the game, and wanted to see how the route I was on impacted them. Since this entry had fewer characters compared to Awakening and Fates, everyone here gets a lot more screen time to show not only what makes them special, but also different sides to them. My favorite's definitely being Dorothea, because I do like how they approach the idea of beauty fading over time with her, and she has a ton of genuinely funny and sweet interactions with everyone. Annette, because she is a precious bean, I love how she gives 1000% to everything, not to mention she has funny supports with characters like Felix. Tetsu, because this guy's been fighting an uphill battle all his life, and I admire how stalwart his devotion is. Ferdinand, because while he is very prideful, when he realizes enough is enough, he can be kind and remarkably mature, especially with his personal struggles. And my personal favorite of the 3 lords, Edelgard, because she is very sophisticated and charismatic, making getting to know her fascinating, making what happens later in the plot hit all the harder. Yeah, this story gets really intriguing because all the choices made, and seeing what is influenced by them. I really grew attached to this narrative, seeing how being there for each one of the house leaders changes them for the better, and for dealing with heavy themes like religious corruption, segregation by class, and history alteration. Without going too much into spoilers, the decisions both the house leaders and you, the player, make could make the whole difference between an ending where they see their visions through to the end, or them getting swallowed by all the chaos. But only one gets that good ending depending on the route. Each route has its own pros and cons, and I like how there is no definitive ending, leaving things up to the player's discretion. The characters also get brought out to their fullest at the central hub of Garrick Monastery. Teaching everyone in class does allow them to reach classes you want for them much more easily, help them get better with certain movement types, and discover that they have a secret hidden talent you might not expect for them. You can also take some time to take them out for skirmishes during some weekends if you want more experience, or just relax in the monastery. Despite its general design getting old after a bit, I still enjoy hanging out around here and talking more to each character. It's through here where you really get to know what everyone thinks of recent story events, or just what they do in their spare time, and having moments of talking with them over tea is pretty wholesome. Heck, in the academy phase, you can even do this with characters not in your class to convince them to join you, adding more character moments and replay value to look out for. Being able to transfer as many of the battle skills and support levels as you want into New Game Plus files does also lead to playthroughs of subsequent routes feel more fun. Oh, and did I mention Crimson Flower also proceeded to turn a relatively mixed bag of a background character into one of the most likable in the whole game after a single update, as well as make him playable? And there was paid DLC adding a new area to Garrick Mach, complete with 4 new characters officially added to your party, with an extra side story for good measure. This is a game where explaining all that it has to offer in a countdown segment is only the beginning. It is pretty overwhelming, but not once did I get bored with it. I'm not sure how ambitious future games will be, since I can understand how some will be burnt out by all this, which is why I recommend taking breaks in between routes, and engagement back to only having a single route will make a lot more conventional decisions in gameplay, structure, and story, which is completely understandable. Whether or not you think that game followed through in those regards is another story. I personally do not, but that's neither here nor there. But Three Houses and a lot of these past few years have shown just how far Fire Emblem has come since Awakening, and I have a feeling the series will continue to strive for bigger and better heights than before. And I wish it the best for that, and for whatever genealogy of the Holy War would be remade. It has been amazing to see Metroid make a comeback recently. It all started with the 3DS remake of a Game Boy game, and a promise of a fourth Metroid Prime that has just started to be fulfilled, and lasted for quite a few years into the pandemic. But that was amazing compared to where the series was in the early to mid-2010s, when the polarizing thoughts on Other M and its financial failure put the series on ice. And the thing we got after nearly 6 years was a co-op shooter on the 3DS. But we got what I believe to be the definitive way to play my favorite Metroid game, and a brand new 2D game after nearly 2 decades. It feels poetic knowing that the very name Metroid Dread has existed on Nintendo's mind since the early DS days, and they entrusted it to Mercury's team after they did really well with Samus Returns. And the game we got is currently my favorite 2D Metroid, and my second favorite game in the series. Samus's controls are super tight and fluid, making even the most basic traversals a joy, helped up by her new slide, which can help in keeping things moving. The general design of each area in ZDR perfectly accommodates this control scheme, and the more upgrades you get as you go along, the more pathways and puzzle possibilities open up. The pathways you can eventually access all help ZDR nail a perfect balance between letting players explore at their own leisure, and guiding them to what they should probably be doing next to progress through the game. There's ways to get items earlier than you were supposed to, and I rarely get lost. The map does a solid job keeping track of where you are and where everything is, so I recommend using it for planning where you want to go, especially if you are going for everything. But that's not just what makes Planet ZDR special, it's also a marvel visually. Each section not only looks pretty, but also invokes an uneasy feeling. Most of the facilities are still in solid condition, with much of the machinery still in good shape, so the fact that it's really barren with hostile creatures wandering around is pretty unnerving. That's more apparent when the planet is swarmed with the culprits of this emptiness, the returning X-Parasites. Not only do they fill in for previous enemies, they often like to transform into much stronger or completely different forms to cause you trouble. But nothing is as unnerving as when you're in the zone of one of the Emmy drones. The encounters with these are nerve-wracking, as getting captured by them is an automatic game over, and depending on the area and what power the Emmy has, they can easily track you down and put you on edge. But I always enjoy going up against them. Once you know each layout, you can find ways to give each one the slip, except for maybe the purple one because it can see through walls, or you can stun them by melee countering if your reaction time is on point. But it is also very satisfying to get the temporary Omega Cannon and just wipe them out to obtain a new power-up. And on that note, I think the game is the best overall combat in the series. Because of how crazy mobile Samus is, the full 360-degree aiming, and the improved melee counter, you can blast a lot of these enemies out in mere seconds and immediately get back on the path you were exploring, and in some cases, be rather reckless. I got a ton of use of the melee counter this time around, and I'm hoping it sticks around for future games. But I think what Samus can do in combat here is showcased best in boss battles. Not only are these a visual spectacle, especially when you get a good counter in, they will require you to use that mobility to avoid their attacks and get in good positions to blast away, especially when you get the flash shift. Otherwise, they'll be absolutely sure to exploit that. And speaking of the bosses, I will not dare give away the finale of this game. To me, this is probably the most excited I have been for what is potentially in store for the franchise's future with what happens here. It ends one conflict with Samus, but begins another, and it could be huge for a potential Metroid 6. And really, Dread is just sublime. I feel so happy that Mercury's team did as fantastic of a job as they did with this, with how much they improved upon Samus Returns, and what new they brought. And I feel so happy that Metroid got back on its feet, and is flying towards a brighter tomorrow. You bet I will be there for the launch of Prime 4, and for whatever Samus's next mission will be. If you ask me, in spite of the fact that the Mario sports titles adopted the free update model too often and too close to one another, I believe the Switch era was the best time to be a fan of Mario. It's amazing to see some older titles see a new life on the system in some form, and to see a new 2D Mario that alleviated the new Super Mario Bros. Burnout caused back in 2012. It'd be an understatement to say Mario Kart 8 Deluxe went beyond being one of many Wii U ports. Mario plus Rabbids was such an odd idea that ended up as two of the more unique exclusives you could find on the system. Mario Party seems to have regained the idea of what makes it special, and for my Mario choice on here, we got what I believe is the shining example of everything great about Mario 3D platformers. Prior to the Switch, I consider the two Galaxy games as my favorite 3D Mario games, for not just being a huge spectacle throughout, but for providing so many fun levels to visit to make the journey feel special. So I was not only overjoyed to see all that was retained in Super Mario Odyssey, I was also on board with the general world design and Mario's controls and moveset, harkening back to the open sandbox design of Mario 64. What I came to appreciate about 64 was how much I could experiment with what Mario was capable of, to explore and see what power stars I could nab out of instinct, helped by the game allowing the player to deviate from the chosen path most of the time. That's dialed up to 9,000 with Odyssey. While the game does give you the idea of where you should be going for the story missions of the kingdom, you are not confined to completing them to progress to the next one. If you want, you can have a look around and fulfill the Power Moon quota through other means. While I usually did the story missions before progressing, most of the time, I was already well above the amount I needed because I just had too much fun exploring the kingdoms. Every one of them is designed like a massive playground, giving you total freedom on where you want to go, and rewarding you for looking around. I was also very happy to see how many secrets there were for showing massive proficiency in the controls and functions. Like, sometimes we're talking maneuvers and timing you see in speedruns, but they don't overtake the ones you can find just by playing casually. There was a ton of consideration how the controls could be used to complete challenges in unintended ways, and going on terrain most would not even consider to. It's like the game knows you will some move or object to achieve certain power moons, and let you do so at some points if you have the skill and a sense of curiosity. All this is before you take the position mechanic into account. Possessing certain enemies and objects opens up a slew of new challenges and ways to explore them before, and it's fun to see what's available. I mean, come on, one of the first kingdoms has a T-Rex for you to use to run amok, and future ones follow suit in creativity and general fun factor. It is a blast seeing where power moons are hidden and how you can get to them, but the coins are worth it as well because of the costumes and accessories you can purchase in each kingdom. I love making Mario look as stylish or as ridiculous as possible, and always make each kingdom feel distinct from one another, and when grouped together, their journey feels like a giant world adventure. Hey everyone. What was he cooking? As for which kingdom is my favorite, I'm definitely going to give that to the Metro Kingdom. I love the aesthetics, the platform challenges hidden within are all wonderful. It has an optional bit where you have to walk through a typical New York crowd, there's a motor scooter you can drive around like a madman with, and the first visit has a cool stormy theme, a fun boss, and the wonderful performance by Pauline at the end, complete with an 8-bit Donkey Kong. I approve of this game making Pauline a staple going forward. But closer for me would have to be the Cascade Kingdom for being a perfect welcome to the game level, and the T-Rex, the Seaside Kingdom for the wonderful beach theme and all the fun challenges above and below the water, and the Luncheon Kingdom because I like it when games explore the food theming. Besides the boss lineup being a mixed bag, and wanting a couple kingdoms to be more fleshed out than they are, I barely have any problems with Mario Odyssey. It retains a ton of the spirit that makes Mario that special, and is best to appeal to veterans of the 64 days, and newcomers who have barely played a Mario game. Odyssey is a game begging you to mess around with it however you want, and I admire how much effort and creativity went into its ideas. It is undoubtedly my favorite Mario game, least of all my favorite Mario platformer. Regardless of how Mario's next big 3D adventure turns out, if this is anything to go by, I'm sure it'll be something special as well. I've been saying a lot that the Switch generation was the best time to be a fan of a lot of Nintendo franchises, but I believe one of the absolute biggest examples of this is Zelda. Now, Zelda was never in any sort of state of uncertainty, unlike a Metroid, nor suffered massively from any sort of mainline or spin-offs feeling like they were on autopilot. But looking back, it is really strange how the Wii U never had any fully new mainline Zelda games to call its own. Only the first Warrior spin-off that got a Switch port, and 2 remasters that did not get a Switch port. I wish they did though. But on the Switch, it's one thing that we got, in my opinion, the best version of Skyward Sword, a Hyrule Warriors continuation, a solid remake of a Game Boy game keeping Zelda's 2D roots alive and well, and Zelda finally getting her own game. It's another to have Breath of the Wild as a console launch title, because this game is really something special. Going open world with Zelda seemed like a very logical thing to do, given how much 3D games at the time tinkered with the idea, and tempting given it was arguably the most popular type of game to make around this time. But Nintendo was absolutely committed to making Hyrule a giant playground filled with things to do, and just about all of it is completely optional. You can just run to the final boss immediately after finishing a small tutorial on the Great Plateau and receiving the paraglider. As discouraged as that may be, I think that was a fantastic decision to help highlight how much exploration and freedom of choice you are given to how you want to proceed through the game. The tutorial is just the right size to show the potential in exploration, but once you get the paraglider, so much opens up, and now it's just a matter of what catches your eye. It could be something big, like something you need to complete a particular story, like Link regaining his memories, or a shrine with a puzzle inside that you can use to further upgrade your health or your stamina. Or it could be something small like a bokoblin camp you can raid to rake in the goods, or just some kind of useful item or animal to hunt. I never got bored of climbing up massive walls or towers to survey the area before paragliding to whatever my heart desires, because I know there will be something good on the other side. And heck, I also never grew bored of hunting animals, because it can be fun to use that meat in various dishes to help my longevity in the field. Cooking is a personal hobby of mine, so this speaks to me. Combat is also a ton of fun, with the requirement to watch when enemies attack and when will be the best time to respond, especially with the flurry rush. In the camp's case, you're encouraged to experiment with stealthy tactics and items present in the environment itself. You may run into some bokoblins that are too dangerous, so it's good to try different approaches. In fact, there are always multiple methods to deal with every combat encounter and puzzle, if not for your inventory, then with your ruin abilities you are given at the start of the game. Sometimes you can use these to be inventive with a solution, and other times, you could just bypass the challenge and move on, which I like doing in certain puzzles. Doing the Divine Beast quest is fun because they take you to some really neat parts of Hyrule, give you some new characters for you to get to know, and provide very fun encounters with the Divine Beasts, even if the bosses with the Ganons inside of them are just kinda eh. In general, the real beauty of Breath of the Wild is just how much you have to do without feeling like you need to do it to reach the finale. A lot of my playtime with this game was just spent messing around doing very insignificant things, and I think that's what the game is best at, and why I'm happy they chose to expand upon it later on. Does anybody remember when Tears of the Kingdom was just known as the sequel to Breath of the Wild? I do, but man, what a sequel! Everything that made Breath of the Wild so amazing is all present and accounted for. The sheer scope of the world, the amount of things you have to do, most of which being optional, every encounter and puzzle being able to be completed in multiple ways, the fun characters you get to meet, but it feels like everything's been upped. Hyrule's essentially 3 times the size it was in Breath of the Wild, thanks to new Sky Islands housing more puzzles and treasures, and the depths that house some of the game's biggest challenges. Both give the game a greater sense of vertical scope with how far you can soar to the heavens or fall far underground, and it feels like natural extensions to the world because of what you can potentially find on each island and section big and small, and how they can help you get a lot more out of the Zonai devices, which are my favorite part of the game. With the Ultra Hand ability, you can make whatever you can think of with the devices and materials you have to solve puzzles more easily or travel around Hyrule with ease. Try to think of what I could potentially build with these made for a great time sink, no matter how useful it ends up being in the long run. One thing I think Tears of the Kingdom has over Breath of the Wild is the dungeons and bosses. The dungeons here don't feel as confined as the Divine Beast interiors, and there's a lot more variety in puzzles and set pieces. The bosses have loads more to offer than the Ganon avatars, as they go beyond being just standard combat encounters and have more puzzle elements to them, which I really appreciate. A lot of other things are in a similar camp to Breath of the Wild, like scavenging for small items, raiding enemy camps, and journeying to the highest places to scout ahead, but with the new things Link can do, which includes jumping through walls above him, and the Zonai devices potentially doing some of the work for you, it doesn't feel like it's retreading too much old ground. Tears of the Kingdom acts as a great continuation to what made Breath of the Wild so special, and it's just a phenomenal game in its own way. I can only go so far in terms of paraphrasing how much I have praised these games in the past, especially Tears of the Kingdom, which I did not that long ago, but that speaks volumes as to how much I got lost in both, but was having fun the whole way, which is why I decided to put both of them at the spot. Tears of the Kingdom may stand on its own and have many improvements over its predecessor, but I still think there is reason to return to Breath of the Wild, and I feel like I'm being a bit disingenuous to it by putting Tears of the Kingdom higher on my Zelda totem. Regardless, I thank Nintendo for both of these games, and for how well they have treated Zelda throughout the Switch's lifespan, and I'm eagerly anticipating to see what they do for the next big release. Will they look at Hyrule at a new point in time, and keep the formula of these games, making changes in areas that make sense? Will they go back to what made games like Ocarina of Time special? Will they do a bit of both, similar to how they implemented some ideas from these games into Echoes of Wisdom? Only time will tell. Even if Platinum Games' current state isn't looking the best, with several people who really made the spirit of their games leaving seemingly around the same time, I'm still thankful for all they've contributed to the Switch, let alone Nintendo consoles in general. Bayonetta 3 was a fantastic third installment of that series, but in the first half of the Switch's lifespan, we were blessed with what I think is their best work, Astral Chain. I will never forget how excited I was for this game when I first saw its reveal back in the February 2019 Nintendo Direct, which I remember for this and the announcement of Mario Maker 2, and it delivered everything I hoped it would. Combat may seem incredibly unconventional at first, with almost all of your capabilities lying within legions, but they act as good accomplices to what you can do at base value, and more importantly, natural extensions to your combos. Popping one of these out after a combo and just watching your character perform these absolutely awesome moves and seeing the damage rack up never gets old, regardless of which legion you are using. But I also appreciate how much combat encounters reward you for ingenuity. Each legion's tag action can be used to make certain enemies much easier to deal with. I especially got so much use out of the Arrow Legion to snipe flying enemies, and others are specifically designed with the tag action in mind. You can also bind some enemies into position and wail on them if you're able to complete a loop around them, which can be very handy on bulkier targets and force some back with the chain counter. The legions even have their own battle skills to wreak some more havoc and make your job easier. I was always looking forward to every encounter to see what I will be facing and where I will be facing them, because I constantly felt rewarded for thinking outside the box and earning moments of huge damage. But I looked forward to the boss battles even more. Many of them are downright daunting, but they really show everything the game is best at, and provide both a fun challenge and a huge spectacle. The game in general is filled with tons of spectacle that gets me anxious about how it will affect this world, but also excited to see how crazy things will get. But what I like about it is that the game is good about saving it for when it would be welcome, and takes time building up to the thread of the chapter otherwise. There's plenty of moments where things slow down, and you get to do something much more calming, like police investigations of crime scenes, or even just roaming around in a specific part of the world you're put in to complete side quests and find extra goodies, some of which being one-use items you might want to have for later. I appreciate how the side quests are a mix of important matters that link to the chimeras to make the threat consistent, and more arbitrary things like delivering a girl some ice cream that you can totally complete by going for the Avalanche special, which... okay, I adore ice cream, but that is definitely too much. And rescuing cats across every chapter and giving them a home. I think somebody on the development team likes cats, and I don't blame them in the slightest. The Ark in general is such a cool place. I really get into how much of it is this grand metropolis overflowing with color thanks to this game's art direction, and other parts of it can be pretty run down and look like they've seen better days, which I think the slums you visit in File 6 emphasize. It all feeds into a story that's incredibly entertaining to follow, and has plenty of great moments for everyone you come across. Some characters resort to some pretty harsh measures for what they believe is the right way forward, but considering the stakes, it makes the setting feel even more unsafe, and each action set piece has more weight as a result. Honestly, with some adjustments, I could see the story being adapted into its own anime, and I'm sure replicating that feeling was the intent, given the structure, and how each file has its own story beats that tie into the main conflict. And with all this, plus all the freedom you have with customizing your character's outfits and legions, including being able to create your own color scheme with them, and a really entertaining soundtrack with some incredible vocal tracks, shouts to Savior and Dark Hero, I have no regrets putting as much time into Astral Chain as I have. It is a marvel of a hack and slash that I think is very easy to learn, but difficult to master, and it is plenty of reason for you to come back for more with multiple difficulties for ranks and challenging missions in the post-game, and it is still my favorite hack and slash, and one of my favorite games on this console. I hear there was a sequel planned for the Switch 2 in development, but it seems to have been put on ice due to disagreements that led to various Platinum alumni leaving the company, and if that is true, then it is very sad that things have come to this. But even if a sequel doesn't happen, the fact that we got this game will always be, to me, a blessing. I think it's safe to say most of you saw this one coming, if not for what I've said about it before, then by this at least being mentioned on almost every other Switch games countdown out there. But really, can you blame anyone? Smash Ultimate is the culmination of Smash Bros. Games throughout Nintendo's console generations, and, over its life cycle, it became a celebration of video games. I always loved and respected the base roster for bringing back everyone, including characters they needed to jump through a ton of copyright hoops in order to get in, and bringing in a great selection of newcomers. I personally was the most excited for Ridley when talking about announcements. But then the DLC happened, and I am still in awe at the characters they ended up getting in, and how much respect they paid to their source material. I personally was won over by Sora the most, because it's insane to think about how far back requests for him went. But I'm also in awe of the amount of work Sakurai did to make Steve work in Smash.
I am Steve.
But what makes this roster work in the end is how each fighter plays. Every veteran feels refined from previous incarnations, if not reworked in a couple areas, and the character balancing in general is really solid. Sure, some do appear higher on tier lists than others, and some of the DLC fighters have some extra privileges, and maybe a gimmick making them more mechanically involved, but I feel like every character is playing capable in every match, are easy to learn, and rewarding yet decently challenging to master if you're willing to put the time into them. Just be sure to map tilt text to the right analog stick and jumping to one of the shoulder buttons. You'll thank me later. But the love doesn't stop there. This stage roster is also a giant collection of some of Smash's best hits, with plenty of new ones thrown in for good measure. It's amazing to see old stages with a new coat of paint, some of which have never gotten the HD treatment, and the new ones are bursting with atmosphere, and some even get super creative even with the smallest gimmick ideas, especially when we get into the DLC. King of Fighters Stadium and Spring Stadium, anyone? The main Smash mode that lets you fit around with all this is also essentially perfect. You have total freedom as to what rules you want, Stage Morph is a fun way to fight on multiple stages in a single match, which I appreciate given this list is in the triple digits, and Squad Strike is a phenomenal addition that I hope is here to stay. I'm surprised they had yet to have team battles with one member participating and having each member tag out based on who was KO'd, but I'm still thankful. All that really does make this game, along with the fun times I had playing online with my friends and various other opponents, despite the online mode's issues. But even though the single-player content is admittedly downplayed here, with some of it being in free content updates, I still get a lot out of the solo modes too. Classic mode is the best it has ever been, with traveling down a set path with a certain character and trying to survive for the best score and make it to the end boss. And even if Master Hand and Crazy Hand were used more often than I would like, the other bosses are excellent. It was amazing to see how some of these guys translated into Smash Bros format, and the cases of Giga Bowser and Marks, it was cool seeing them back and updated in welcome ways. These were also what I look forward to the most in World of Light. For as admittedly drawn out as this mode is, and for how much it was disappointing to see no platforming akin to Subspace, I still like this mode too. Searching for new spirits, getting stronger while doing so, and seeing how they pay homage to a lot of franchises was really neat. I'll also say that it definitely goes out on a high note, and leave it at that. You've also got the stage builder that lets you build even more than before, the ability to take replays you have and turn them into edited videos, a giant space online dedicated to sharing those stages and videos, and so much more to sink hours upon hours into. In fact, out of every game in my Switch catalog, this is the one that I have sunk the most amount of time into. Throughout its life cycle, I was eagerly anticipating the next fighter, learning to play as much thruster as I could, and just exploring what there was to do. Above all else, the general feel of Smash Ultimate, from control to character balance, feels just right. My personal favorite veterans feel perfect to play as, and I picked up so many newcomers to continue battling on. I don't think this will be the last Smash Bros. Game we will get, but I do think when a Smash 6 does happen, it should go back to being a celebration of Nintendo, if not to avoid trying to outdo Ultimate, as I'm not sure how that can be done without biting off more than one can chew, than to continue to show how much of an achievement Super Smash Bros. Ultimate truly is. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Is it a well-optimized game for the Switch? No. Do I think it's a sign that Pokemon companies should let go of the 3-year generation cycle? Yes. Do I think this game is excellent despite all this? Absolutely. I may think Terra raid battles are a step back compared to max raid battles, but everything else from the stories, to the variety of new and old Pokemon available, to the freedom you have to explore Paldea, made this a lovely experience in the end. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, a wonderful return to form for 2D Mario that goes absolutely nuts with the level set pieces created by the Wonder Flowers. It was exactly what Mario needed after going without a new 2D entry for 11 years, and I think we could say it's the beginning of a new era for the franchise. Fire Emblem Warriors. It may not be as big of a celebration of the series as most of us were hoping, and I'm still convinced the point where this game was pulled so that Kouhai could work on 3 houses, but out of all the Warriors crossovers, I like this one the most. Character interaction-wise, it gives the best of everyone moments to shine, and can be hilarious sometimes. Gameplay-wise, the combat feels the fastest and the smoothest, and it is the most fun I've had dividing each unit, conquering each map, and customizing everyone to do that more efficiently. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. If I were just talking about the base game, I would not consider mentioning this, as all that was really different about 8 Deluxe compared to OG 8, which if you ask me, was already a fantastic game, is the much better battle mode, which I still welcome. But the Booster Course Pass happened and turned this game, content-wise, into the best Mario Kart as of right now. This game already felt great to play, but the DLC doubled its size and made it even better. Super Mario Party Jamboree. I got into Mario Party with Superstars, and of the ones I've played, which are this, 2, 3, and Superstars, with a sample of 7, this one is my favorite. It has a ton of fun mini-games, an amazing selection of boards, with Rainbow Galleria being my personal favorite, 2 sets of rules for how you want the party to go, and a great variety of side modes, some of which I think playing online with random people is a good idea for. Definitely a go-to when I want to hang out with friends. Super Mario Maker 2. While I don't think the interface translated onto Switch as well as the Wii U gamepad, I still love how much more you have to work with in level creation. Seeing all the awesome levels and musical arrangements online is always a treat too. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Hard to believe we finally got a Zelda game where you play as Zelda, and how we got a full new overhead game 11 years after A Link Between Worlds. But Echoes of Wisdom shines at how many solutions to a puzzle there are, and how you can use each echo to explore, sort of taking some design philosophy from the open world Switch titles, and modifying them to another type of Zelda game, which I welcome. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Of the 2 new numbered entries, I much prefer this one. While the tutorialization can be a bit of an overcorrection to 2 giving some of the wrong ideas, I love how much freedom of customization you have with each party member, and the number of options you have for combat. I also got a lot out of exploring and completing side quests, because that contributes to gaining new classes and learning new skills. I will admit I feel a bit dirty leaving Xenoblade off, because with the 2 numbered sequels and the best versions of both the previous entries, the Switch did not just provide the best time to be a Xenoblade fan, it made Xenoblade a household name for Nintendo, and I anticipate what Monolith plans to do next. No More Heroes 3, my favorite of the No More Heroes games. The story is compelling with bringing Travis's character arc full circle, the combat feels the best out of all the games, the bosses are among the series' best, and this game goes hog wild with the amount of homages to classic and modern movies alike. I would not be surprised if Suda played anything he might have learned from working with James Gunn here. And finally, F-Zero 99. Not exactly how I pictured F-Zero getting a new game after all this time, but I wholeheartedly welcome it. Honestly, the idea of a battle royale fit into a racing game like a glove. I am happy that F-Zero fans are getting just a little bit of validation with this, the Game Boy Advance games being released on the Switch Online service, and GX being planned for the Switch too. But I do hope we can get another game at some point. So, Pokemon, am I right? As sad as it is to admit, the time of the Switch was not the best time to be a Pokemon fan. In fact, I'd say parts of it were some of the worst, especially the lead up to Sword and Shield. But even in the face of that, I still think we got tons of great games out of it. Scarlet and Violet is in my honorable mentions for having some big series highlights. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was a cute sidestep back to Kanto using Go mechanics. Sword and Shield not only refined some things from Generation 7, but also experimented a ton with the wild areas, and had some of the most fun trainer battles in the series, along with some of the most likable characters. And Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was a great callback to the pre-3DS era with some modern twists and very welcome additions and alterations. But out of every mainline Pokemon game on the Switch, one stood tall and proud and managed to give good competition to my favorite game of all time. And that makes this game worthy of being called Legend. Picking this game for the top was not a very difficult decision at all. Pokemon Legends Arceus was not just willing to experiment with new mechanics and ideas, it goes even further with exploration and adventure than what could be done before. Even if the game is comprised of a bunch of smaller open environments than a full single open one like what Scarlet and Violet did, and even if you don't have as much freedom as to how you want to progress through the story, every area in Hisui feels perfect in size where I just get a natural itch to explore everywhere I can. I know I'll be able to salvage a bunch of collectibles out in the field that I can use to catch more Pokemon and keep my own healthy, and that will be necessary given how easy it can be to run into ones that will attack you on sight, some being way higher level than you, and some being alpha Pokemon that can easily rip you apart if you make one wrong move. The game does a great job in highlighting how dangerous Pokemon can truly be to the average person, especially noble Pokemon who combine the traditional battle system with needing to physically dodge their attacks yourself while throwing bombs to calm them down. Those in particular are also a big highlight for me, but it's also fun to explore because catching Pokemon in this game is the most satisfying it has felt in the entire series. You can engage Pokemon in battle and catch them in the traditional sense, but to me, it's more worth it to catch them outside of battle, using the environment to stay hidden from them, throw a ball when their back is turned, throwing some bait to get them where you want, throwing some mud or special items to hopefully stun them. There's a lot to consider when trying to catch a Pokemon this way, and it's way more fun as a result, especially if said Pokemon is much higher level compared to what you have or what's around you. I love catching Pokemon so much that this is the only Pokemon game where I've legitimately gone for full Pokédex completion. You can catch a lot of the same Pokemon to fill in the pages of the Pokédex, and it will give you results, but fulfilling one of the bonus objectives in their pages, like using certain moves or catching another in a very specific way, always feels better. It's almost like I'm learning more about them as I become more seasoned at the game, which I think fits with being a member of a research corporation. The variety of Pokemon you can catch is also excellent, as every single area offers something that could be a valuable addition to your team, even temporarily, and if you look hard enough, you can find something much rarer like a starter Pokemon. I always look forward to those. Battles are definitely some of the most fun here too, for both all kinds of wild Pokemon and trainers, thanks to the changes made to the general structure of them. While battles are still turn-based, they're more about managing turns instead of choosing the right action for a single one. Speed can generally dictate who gets a turn at a particular moment, but you can potentially get 2 turns in a row to act through speed and or good usage of move styles. If a Pokemon has the option to, they can use the move in either Strong Style, which adds more power at the cost of potentially losing a turn or letting that foe take 2, or Quick Style, which is weaker but makes it so you can act faster. There's many ways you can manipulate this to your advantage, and depending on what you are fighting, there's a lot of strategy involved as to what the foe could do next, and how they could use these styles to their advantage. Even if they're not as common as other entries, I always look forward to trainer battles as a result. Shoutouts to Rest for making Starly, Shinx, and the one and only Bidoof actually a solid challenge. Trainer battles being uncommon, and wild Pokemon being hostile, contributes a lot in giving Hisui and the game an identity all its own. I never really considered how the staples of Pokemon would work in an era in the very distant past, but seeing it presented, let alone in a time where the Pokeball was a fairly recent invention, was just really cool. Hisui is a far more primal feel than regions we've seen before and since, with nature and the ancient temples largely being the big highlights, and actual settlements being few and far between. all helped out by that soundtrack using more classical instrumentation that 100% fits the atmosphere and mood. But I always get giddy whenever a remix of a certain theme from Generation 4 pops up. There's plenty of great characters and a decently compelling story to go along with it, which I absolutely welcome. But my attention was on catching and learning about every Pokemon available, solving puzzles to find even more, and shuffling around my team every so often to go even farther out. Because that makes Legends Arceus and even Pokemon as a whole for me. Mainline Pokemon games tend to be some of my favorites on a console, you probably heard me say that before, but the awe this game left me in, and the desire to continue playing, really made this one of my favorite adventures in the series yet, and in general, my favorite experience on the Switch. This feels like Pokemon wants to take risks with its ideas and be better beyond what we expected years ago, and I am sure it will continue to do so. I look forward to seeing how you follow along, Legends CA. I'm the Lightning Ripper, and thank you for all the memories over the years, Nintendo Switch. I sincerely hope the Switch 2 continues the legacy left behind. See you all next time.